Hi everyone and welcome to a comparison video. So today I want to do the smooching technique with 4 different mediums onto 5 different watercolor cardstocks and kind of comparison how they work. So the cardstocks that I'm using is this, which is the Decorima, which is the least expensive one. It was actually kind of affordable. Then I'm going to use this 300 GSM Crafter's Companion watercolor card, which I had in my stash for years and years. It's not as flimsy as the cheapest one, but it's still not like a proper cardstock. Then I have the Holtz watercolor cardstock, the distress one. I've lost the packaging, sorry about that. And the 4th one is going to be the MONTVAL Aquarelle. It's 300 GSM. I think it's even cold press. It's cellulose anyhow. And it's have been my favorite cardstock for a very long time. And then I have gotten myself a pad of arches because I really wanted to see how the arches compares to other cardstocks. So few things, you see the different cardstocks have different colors. So the arches is almost a yellow tone, while the more affordable ones have more of a stark white tone. And I think that is because you bleach them and you don't bleach the finer cardstock because that can kind of ruin the fibers in them, something like that. Anyhow, the first comparison or the first media I'm going to use in this comparison is the distress inks. So I'm showing a whole bunch of them, but I'm actually just using the pumice stone and weathered wood in this technique. I was thinking about having splatters onto them, but I decided in the end that I just want to show you how I do my smooching technique and how it looks on different cardstocks, because that was kind of the idea behind this. I wanted to know, is there a difference between different cardstocks, how the smooching technique will show up, and how easy it is to get the results that I want. Well, as you can see, the first things that happened with the cheapest one, the Decorima, which I think was like $1 or $2 for like 50 sheets. It's super inexpensive and it curls. It's the first thing is that it curls. It does kind of straighten out a bit when I'm using my heater, which I do between every time I dip it into the ink. So first I smooch it and then I kind of dip it. So the smooch gives you the base color and then the dips give you the kind of spotting on top. And as you see here, the spotting when you dry it will give these kind of halos, which I really, really love. I love this technique and I love using it with these 2 colors because you get a pretty cool neutral from it. So in between every little piece of paper, I am changing the inks. I'm doing that because I want to have the same amount of pigment, about the same amount of pigment every time, and really see how the paper reacts. So the second paper is the Crafter's Companion paper, which has the most texture out of all of these paper. The Crafter's Companion has the most texture, and I think that is why it has been lying in my drawers for such a long time, because I bought it to be able to paint on, do stamping and then paint on, and didn't really work for that. However, it kind of gives a good impression when you do the smooching. So the third one is the Holtz. So I'm going to go from the cheapest to the more expensive every time. And this is when you realize that you don't have to dip the paper as many times with the little bit more expensive papers. The colors kind of show up a little bit better. However, there's a few things to think about, and that is that the more expensive the paper is, the more water you need sprayed on together with your pigment to get it to flow onto the cardstock. And for the last piece here, it's the arches. And the arches actually have like a sandpapery texture. It's really strange, but it's kind of cool at the same time. And that one actually gives these beautiful, really beautiful, really kind of, the first layer just seeps out and gives this gradient of some sort. It's just gorgeous. That is gorgeous. Just that background in itself is gorgeous. But I do love how all of these turned out. However, I do feel that the cheapest one is a little bit too flimsy to have as a background. But still, it can work. So here is the cards for the second one, and then I'm going to use the real brush pens. And you can actually use any kind of water reactive brush pens that you have. The Tim Holtz Distress Ink ones, the Tombow, or as I do here, the real brush ones. And I really like how easy it is. I'm doing the same kind of idea with all of the colors, and that is that I take one color that I have about 1/4 of, and then I take one color that I have like 3/4 of, so that there always be a dominant color on the cardstock, because I don't want them to have equal space. I want one to be a little bit more dominant than the other. I realized very early on with these pens though, for the more cheaper cardstock, the pigment kind of disappears a little. It's not as prominent with these pens. So I almost considered doing a second dip, a second full coloring onto the craft sheet, and then doing the dips on several of the cardstocks with the real brush pens. But there's nothing kind of stopping you from doing it. I just thought that I would give all the cardstock the same amount of ink and therefore see how they react with it. And it was really fun to doing this. However, my boyfriend was a little bit annoyed of the sound of my heat tool. I think I have to look into finding a quieter heat tool. Then we have the Tim Holtz one, and this is when I realized that I really need a lot of water with these pens. With the distress inks, you get so much ink onto the paper, but with the brush pens, you get a lot less ink, so you need to add more water than you would do with the distress ink pads. So that is also a little tip on choosing. But yeah, I was a little bit, I had wanted the colors to stand out a little bit more. So to give it a deeper color, you probably would need to add more color to your your craft mat. Sorry, sometimes words disappear, but that's okay. So then I just dip. In this case, I actually did it. I put the whole thing down and just smooch it around an extra time, and kind of lost a lot of the dots that I didn't really like, and got kind of a new start. And with this, I'm like, okay, I need a lot more water. But I do like the effect. By not adding so much water, I get a really cool kind of fighting texture between the two colors in the middle. Yeah, I really like the smooching technique. It's really fun to play around with. But the yellow of the Arches cardstock really shows up, especially here where the bluish gray actually turns more towards the greenish. So it kind of you really see here how the white cardstock has a totally different color than the others. So for my third medium, I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress crayons. These are kind of a medium that I forget that I have. I even put it so that I have it in my eyesight so I shouldn't forget them. And every time it's like, no, I use another medium today. So today I thought I'd test this out. I never done the smooching techniques with distress inks. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I just got confused. But I don't think I have actually. A few things when you're playing around with distress crayons, you need to let the water lay a little bit of a time on top of the crayons so the crayons have time to react with the water. And also you want to push a little bit on your paper and move it around a little bit so that the crayon and the water kind of react a little bit extra with each other. So those are my 2 tips if you want to play around with your crayons. Faber-Castell has some kind of similar medium. I know that they call 2 scoops when there are the bigger ones, but I just can't remember the name of the product. Anyhow, you can probably do this technique with those 2. So you just don't need to have the Tim Holtz version of this kind of medium. Here you see with the textured papers that the texture really shows up when you're using the crayons. The pigment kind of don't dissolve the same way as in the liquid pigments or the liquid inks and pens that we used. So any kind of texture you have on your cardstock will actually show up a lot more, like you had kind of drawn with a crayon on top of it. But I kind of like the texture. So again, it has a little bit of a different feel than the other mediums, but you can still use the same technique. And again, I'm just layering and dropping. You don't get the same kind of dotting as you get with the other mediums, because the ink doesn't pearl, or the color, because of the ink is the pigment is in the crayon form, it never really pearls on the surface of the mat, on the craft mat, so you don't really get the same kind of droplets. Instead you get like smooches, a little bit of a bigger smooches, but I do like how they turned up in the end. And I really was surprised over the blackness of the Hickory Smoke crayon. So it had like different layers of color in it. Really cool. For the 4th and last medium, I'm using these Glimmer mists. Again, a product that has been laying in my stash a little too long. And I do have 3 bottles of this, and I think I used one of them. And it's not one of these 2. So it takes a little while for them to kind of start spraying as they should. Also, with this, because I didn't feel I got enough ink from the first spray, I spray a couple of times on the same place, like 2-3 times. And I ended up with so much color, especially as I use some extra water on it to kind of make it a little bit thinner, because I want to be able to layer it, and I was worried that the color would be way too stark. So this is actually the only medium where I do 2 of these cards per kind of color, or per spray or color lay down, because I just didn't want to just dry it up. I wanted to use it. And as a little note, now when we're about to come to the end of the video, all of these little squares are actually cut to 2 3/4, and I'm actually using them for 20 cards. And these cards are actually showing how I put them together in the second video that you get today. Also, if you head on over to that video, you will find out how you can be one happy owner of one of those cards. I'm giving away all 20 of them, so you have basically 20 possibilities to get one of those cards. So head over to that video and listen to the end, and I will tell you how you can get one of those cards. So I'm not wasting anything, it's not just a test, it's actually ending up being kind of fun cards. With these papers and this ink, which I think was awesome, you saw even more how the more expensive papers really took the color in a different way. The ink kind of seeped much deeper into the cardstock and made more even washes than you would get with more cheaper paper. But as when I do these kind of smooching techniques, I do want most often I want to have the splattery effect. So I'm not completely sure that Arches is for me at least, for how I want this technique to work, is a good choice. However, I am going to use my Arches for other things. For example, watercoloring, because I think that would be completely awesome for that. But I have to try it out first, because I haven't. I've just been smooching it. But yeah, this was actually the whole comparison. There will be a little clip here in just a second with all of the different papers stacked onto each other with all of the different mediums. And as a kind of conclusion of this, you can use most any kind of watercolor cardstock for this technique. I do, however, recommend a little bit of a thicker weight. 180 GSM is a little bit too thin. The Crafter's Companion cardstock actually measured up pretty good, so I'm definitely going to use that up and use it for smooching techniques. The Tim Holtz, I was surprised how awesome it was. I do still like my Canson, and I now have a huge pack of it, so I'm going to use it. However, the Arches might actually be a little bit too expensive for this kind of technique. But I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, just comment down below. If you like this video, please thumbs it up. If you want to see more videos like this, just hit that subscribe button. I want to say again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!